Hi everyone, my name is Helen and I will be opening up this video by starting from session 1 of the Business Negotiations course. In this chapter, we will discuss what distributive negotiations is, cover a few negotiation tactics, discuss several defense tactics, and lastly conclude the chapter with key takeaway points. Right, so starting off with what is distributive negotiations? Well, distributive negotiations is a competitive bargaining or negotiation strategy in which one party essentially gains only if the other party loses something. This is often used as a negotiation strategy to distribute fixed resources such as money or assets between two parties. Right, so moving on to a few tactics that have been specifically selected for the purpose of this video, but are not limited to the examples given. Starting off with see you in court. This is often used as an ultimatum in cases with legal implications. This should of course be used sparingly and only as the real last resort. Next, the last minute escalation or hesitating pen. This is a very common tactic which uses the final moments of a negotiation to really get the last concession in. It is usually expressed as a final favor, for example, okay, just 0.25% more discount and we've got a deal for ourselves. This is of course often very much played just before signing the contract. Next, good guy, bad guy. This is also used for very skillful negotiators who really know their partner exceptionally well. Essentially, the tactic is to try to get the opposing team to help you convince your partner that the bad guy to accept a deal, which is of course much more profitable for you. Fading beauty. This is where information has been withheld, so the final picture is not as beautiful or glamorous as it first seemed. An example of this is the sunny 100 square meter flat overlooking the park is really just only 60 square meters interior flat with absolutely no view. But since you've made the effort to come here, we might as well talk. Lastly, salami. Little by little, you try to get an agreement, but you prefer to have a number of small negotiations, example, the price, the delivery, terms of payment, rather than a global or bigger negotiation. Right, starting with the defense tactics. The defense tactics could include the following, but are not limited to the examples given. Firstly, recognize. This is a crucial part of the process where it's really vital to recognize the essential elements of the case at hand. Also, be fully aware that the other party is going to be playing negotiation tactics on you. Second, call it. Be the first to start the negotiation because often the first to pave the way will be the one to determine how the negotiation ends. In addition, let your negotiation partner know that you are quite aware of what their negotiation tactics are and have confidence in that. Thirdly, walk away. Know when it's the right time to let it be and walk away. This is often in the case where the situation becomes aggressive or the conversation is essentially leading in no positive direction at all. Lastly, refocus. This is where you evaluate and understand what has occurred and refocus on what is most important for moving forward. Key takeaway points. Use the appropriate negotiation tactics. Circumstances of different occurrences will all be unique, and therefore it's important to evaluate the situation at hand and the negotiation environment in order to ensure that you are using the appropriate negotiation tactics that are best suited for this example. Second, never lie. At all times, stick to facts and honest conversation, simply because once trust is broken, it is quite hard to rebuild and to get back to the point that you once were at. Thirdly, be comfortable with silence at times. Silence is not necessarily a bad thing. Allow for there to be moments of silence and be comfortable with it. Lastly, be direct. Be direct with the negotiations and your intentions. After all, you are there to try and gain something in your favor.
Hello, my name is Viktoria and I will cover the session 2, the slides for the session 2, and we'll give some explanations. Well, first of all, we covered 2 case studies, one of which being the Pakistani prune case, and the other one was a salary negotiation. But I will also explain and cover what we did in class in terms of topic, and that was the stages of negotiation. So on this slide, I will explain the prune case in which there were 2 participants and 1 major issue to sort out. For this negotiation to work, our class was cut in half, and 1 half each got assigned to play 1 participant for this negotiation. Then we had to meet up in pairs of 2, with 1 person being participant 1 and the other one being participant 2 to negotiate on this issue. The case itself dealt with Dr. Rubio Sanchez, a research scientist for the United Nations Standing Committee on World Hunger, who developed a method to increase the food production supply in third world countries. This would help about 20,000 people, and he was allowed to spend $5 million for the whole harvest. The other participant was Dr. Kim Wilson, also a research scientist at Technogen, a leading company based in San Jose in California. And Technogen spent already millions of dollars to develop a new drug which could lower blood cholesterol and could possibly also save about 20,000 people. However, this company was in a financially better situation and could spend about $8 million for the whole harvest. In this case, the goal for each negotiator was to get the maximum out of the negotiation. However, instead of focusing solely on what one party wants, the ultimate goal was to reach a compromise both parties could live with. And in the end, it turned out that both parties could have 100% of what they wanted, since they wanted different parts of the prune. Participant 1, Dr. Rubio Sanchez, actually only needed the pits of the prune, whereas Dr. Kim Wilson only needed the pulp of the prune. So it was actually a matter of just telling the other person or making clear what was the most important part for each participant to then sort out, because both parties could actually go away with 100% of what they initially wanted. Alright, so the next slide already deals with the next negotiation case, the salary negotiation. And for this, we were also paired in teams of 2, one being the job recruiter and the other one being the job candidate. Beforehand, we received a table with the issues that needed to be solved and discussed, and also with what negotiation outcome we would score highest, or actually what outcome would give us how many points. In this case, the recruiter was told to reach around or a minimum of 2,500 points, whereas the candidate had to reach at least 4,000 points. The issues that had to be solved or discussed were the bonus, the job assignment, the vacation time, the moving expense coverage, the insurance coverage, location, and salary. For example, for the candidate, the bonus issue would generate the most points, so this is what should be the most important. But for the recruiter, another issue was more important and scored higher. In the class slides, there were pictures of different outcomes, and also how it would be best to pair what with what in order to reach the best possible outcomes. However, to save some speaking time, I will not go through the individual pictures and scenarios. In the end, what we were to focus on and start with was what was most important for us to achieve, such as what issue gave us the highest scores, and then just move further down the table. The same procedure would also apply to the other party or the other participant. This way, both parties could come to an agreement they can both live with, and even reach way more points than their given minimum. So, however, if one only focused on winning everything and meeting in the middle of every issue that had to be solved, then the outcome was right at their acceptable minimum. This would be less efficient for either of those 2 parties, as shown in the Pareto graph, which will be shown in the next slide. But the thing is, like I explained, for the participant or for both participants, it would be best to really focus on what is the most important for them and not really stick to just finding a compromise in the middle. So in the end, this would give both parties a higher score. Alright, so the next slide focuses on the stages of negotiation, which are the preparation, during, and posterior. Before the start of negotiations, one must be aware of the conflict, the history leading to the negotiation of the people involved, their perception of the conflict, and also expectations from the negotiations. Before starting the negotiation, one therefore needs to do some homework. For example, what's the nature of the conflict? What's the history leading up to this negotiation? And who's involved and what are their perceptions of the conflict? Moreover, before any negotiation takes place, a decision needs to be taken as to when and where a meeting will take place to discuss the problem and who will attend. Setting a limited time scale can also be helpful to prevent disagreement from continuing, and this stage involves ensuring all the pertinent facts of the situation are known in order to clarify their own position. One also needs to prepare an assessment of what the other party's negotiations goals are and what they might be or what are they likely to ask for in this negotiation. Once the planning and strategy are developed, one has to begin defining the ground rules and procedures with the other party over the negotiation itself that will do the negotiation. For example, where will it take place? What time constraints, if any, will apply? To what issues will negotiations be limited? And also, will there be a specific procedure to follow if an impasse is reached? During this phase, the parties will also exchange their initial proposals or demands. When initial positions have been exchanged, both the parties will explain, amplify, clarify, bolster, and also justify their original demands. This does not need to be confrontational, rather it is an opportunity for educating and informing each other on the issues, why they are important, and how each arrived to their initial demands. This is also the point where one party might want to provide the other party with any documentation that helps support its position. The essence of the negotiation process is the actual give and take in trying to hash out an agreement. It is here where concessions will undoubtedly need to be made by both parties. The final step in the negotiation process is a formalization of the agreement that has been worked out and developing procedures that are necessary for implementation and monitoring. For major negotiations, this will require hammering out the specifics in a formal contract. And also, one must also ensure to follow through on promises made in order to strengthen the relationship and to build trust. This will make one learn more in this stage about the other side and will lead to easy negotiations next time around. In all steps of the negotiation process, the involved parties bargain in a systematic way to decide how to allocate scarce resources and maintain each other's interests.
Well done, girls, for the presentation so far, and thank you for passing the mic to me. So I'm Dimitrios, and I will try to analyze the main topics we saw on session number 3, which was around 2 main pillars. One was the Hofstede's cultural dimension theory, and the second was the cartoon case, which we were trying to negotiate on that. I'll go deeper in details on the next slides. The first time I heard about Hofstede's name, I thought he was a German football player playing at Bundesliga, but this was not so true. So his contribution was, and is still, very great because he understood the differences between the countries, the cultural gap the countries have. So he tried to understand and to explain how different people from different cultural background would react in the certain situation. During the session 3, we saw some charts representing the position every country has, depends on the way they behave on a negotiation. Regarding the leadership, we saw some countries are more egalitarian, like Australia or Denmark. Some other countries are having better respect to hierarchy, like Japan and China. Also, we saw the different styles they have on the decision making. Some of them countries are more consensual, like German. Some of them they have this top-down approach, like Indonesia. Another interesting chart we saw was about the trust the different countries have. Some of them are more task-based, like Germany. They want to have the project done. They believe in the project, and they only want to put the trust in is about the business activities. Some other countries also, on the other hand, they have this relationship-based approach. They prefer someone who they will go easily for a coffee with, to have a dinner or a lunch together, and having a nice atmosphere, making some jokes with, is the person who put the trust with, not the business. The last chart we saw was about how much or not confrontational countries are. Some countries like France, for example, they like to confrontate. They like to be confrontational. Some other countries, they hate that, like Japan, for example. This is a very interesting exercise for me to understand where my country belongs. Like Greece, in this chart, would be in the middle, would be confrontational or not. Interesting. On the last part of session 3 of the negotiation course, we had to, yes, you guessed it correct, to negotiate. It was an exercise between a Japanese buyer and a US seller. Let me just very briefly present you and explain you the story, what it was about. The US seller, it was a producer, a film producer, and he had a film series, a cartoon film series for kids, and the Japanese buyer wanted to buy. They had to negotiate about the price and different elements of that. As the TV ratio, the stars ratio the sellers had, also the way of the payment. Are we going to pay upfront the whole amount, the first year, the second year, etc., etc.? A very interesting element was also a second cartoon series the producer had called Strumps. It was very interesting because it was not the great or the greatest parameter of the negotiation, although it was very important because, as the professor said, when we want to create and add value to the negotiation, we have to add more elements, more parameters. And this was the best lesson I had from that course.
Hi, I am Daniela and I will be presenting our fourth and last session. In this class, we made a multi-party simulation negotiation of hard work. We started our fourth session by reviewing some topics with the professor about the previous classes that might be helpful for this particular negotiation, that it's a multi-party negotiation, and what kind of strategies we can set ahead to be prepared. First of all, we need to know our BATNA and set our priorities. Second, identify our parties' interests by listening to them, asking questions, and knowing what's important to them to try to create value together. Third, we need to prepare some packs that we will be offering during the negotiation, so the other party also can know our interests and they can know what can we accept and we can really not accept. And finally, having a scoring system is also very helpful, so we know if we're in the right path or not, if we're losing or winning in all the moment of the negotiation. Now, getting directly into her workers case, we already had to read the general instructions, but also we've been assigned one part and had a separate document where we could read our own insights, our own interests, and be prepared for the negotiation. To sum up what the case is about, Harborco is a national consortium that wants to finance, construct, and operate a new port, but cannot proceed without the support of other 5 parties. The 5 parties are the Environmental League, local federation of labor union, other ports of the region, Federal Department of Cultural Resources, and the government of the city. And also there are 5 issues to be addressed: industry mix, ecological impact, employment rules, federal loan, and compensation to other ports of the region. And as we know, each party has different interests, and some of them have more weight than the other issues. At the end of the document that we have to read, there was Harborco's proposition, that of course is Harborco's Batna, but it was not convenient for the other parties, and that's when the counter offers started and the negotiations started. Luckily, the scoring system was already in our pages, and every particular party has their own scoring system, and we can meet in duos before the group negotiation, where we can talk about the insights, strategies, packs, the BATNA, the walking point, and so on. In the next section, I will be explaining what the lessons being learned about this particular negotiation. Finally, and the most important thing, is the lessons learned about Harborco's negotiation. In my particular group, there was not a 6-party consensus, but 5 of the parties were satisfied with the results. And the lessons we learned was about mediation, that we needed a person that leads the conversation, because in moments it was very heated up and we were stuck in some points, we couldn't move forward, and everyone wanted to talk at the same time. Some parties didn't explain or make the point of view as much as they might want it, so we needed a person to lead the conversation, and that's very important in a multi-party negotiation. Next, we learned about the blocking coalitions. There were some ultimatums and some unsaid alliances that might be an important thing to recognize for another type of multi-party negotiations. Also, another thing that's very important that has been learned is the fairness versus efficient, because for Harborco, it was important to have 4 yeses and 1 people can say no. That's what happened in my particular group. So that reminds me of the Pareto efficientness, that sometimes it cannot be fair, but it's efficient for the negotiation. That negotiation is being done, and some of the parties will be satisfied with that. And finally, using the packs instead of voting for each consent to be consent in each of the elements. It would be easier for the whole negotiation if every party would say 3 different packs that they will be able or be wanting to accept, instead of voting for each of the issues the topics we had to do. So, well, that's it. That's what we learned, and thank you so much.